and welcome to the Montessori Family Alliance webcast. This is Lorna McGrath, your host, and today with me I have Chip DeLorenzo. If this is your first time joining us, we'd love to hear from you. There's a box on the right-hand side of your screen where you can write questions or comments, and we'll answer them as we go. There's also usually a handout, which I'm working on right now, and hopefully it'll be up before we're done, and you can download that as a reminder for notes, or you can look at it later. For those of you who join us regularly, welcome back, and feel free to write down your questions and comments as well. As members of the Montessori Family Alliance, you will have access to a recorded version of today's webcast on the Alliance webpage in the Resource Center. Remember to give us about a week to edit and get that posted, and you can look back at that anytime that you want to, or send it to a friend, however you would like to use that. So again, here with me today is Chip DeLorenzo, and Chip, if you would go to the first slide, that will remind me of some of your credentials. I know you're the headmaster of a school up in Maine, a Montessori school up in Maine, and I'm not going to say it right, so I'll try it, but you tell me if I'm saying it right. It's Damariscotta? How do you say that?
Pretty close. It's Damariscotta.
Damariscotta, sorry. Yeah. Damariscotta Montessori School. You also have a sort of a business, I think, called Developing Capable Children, where you are a consultant and a trainer. And you do positive parenting, which is based on a lot of Rudolf Dreikers' work. And I'm a big fan of Rudolf Dreikers as well, and I have done a lot of similar kind of parenting work through someone else rather than Jane Nelson. It's Catherine Coles, who's on this coast. I know that you used to be in California. That's probably how you first found out about Jane Nelson, right?
Exactly.
All right. Well, I'm so glad that you're here. Thank you for joining us. We're looking forward to your information that you're going to share. So let's get started.
All right, great. And can you hear me okay now?
I can hear you just fine, thanks.
Great. So we have an ambitious goal, which is to try to get through some information and some tools about how to follow through with children in a way that's respectful and kind, but also effective, which are two things that are not exclusive of one another, and do so in ways that are consistent with Montessori principles. I'll just give you a quick background about how I found this work. That's it's been implemented by Jane Nelson and others, but really, as Lorna mentioned, it's based on the work of Alfred Adler and Rudolf Dreikers. And essentially, I was a first-year teacher who was struggling in my classroom, and really with a lot of hopes and dreams about what I wanted for the kids in my classroom and how I wanted to interact with them. But just the same that happened when I became a parent. What I had in my mind of what I wanted to be and how I wanted to interact with children was very different than what that started to look like, because kids throw us curveballs, and it's not a movie anymore. It's real life, and children often will start to push back and to misbehave, and so I found positive discipline really out of some desperation. I was looking for some answers, and a mentor of mine suggested some of this work by Dreikers and Adler. And I dove into it really with both feet out of desperation. And what I found, I think that told me, is that it actually worked. It worked for me. And since then, I do a lot of work with Montessori schools all around the country in terms of helping them to implement discipline policies that are consistent with Montessori principles, and also work with a lot of parents in that same vein. And what I'd like to do today is just what we're going to do today in the webinar is to really kind of go back to what it is that we want for our children ultimately. And then secondly is how do we go about getting that through effective and respectful discipline. And then I'd like to talk about a few tools, well, at least as many as we have time for today, and how to develop cooperation, independence, and mutual respect with children, and quite simply how to set limits with kids, which is one of the things that we need to do as parents and teachers, in a way that that works, but leaves them feeling good about themselves and leaves us feeling good about ourselves. Um, so
Oh,
when I do work,
Chip,
go ahead.
Yep.
Yeah.
I wanted to jump in for a second and let people know that the handout is on now, and if you want to download it and print it out, you can. It's there on the right-hand side where your control panel is. There's a section that says handouts, and you'll see positive discipline for Montessori parents. So feel free to do that. Okay, let's keep going. Very good.
Okay. So when I do workshops for parents, one of the questions that I always ask is, what are some of our biggest stressors as parents? And what often comes back is I could increase this list even more, but these are some common examples of what parents come up with as some of the biggest stressors that we're all dealing with at home. Children don't listen, fights with siblings, they're disorganized, lack of focus or concentration, they're arguing with them between each other and adults. There's food struggles, power struggles, not listening. My favorite is getting out the door in the morning. I won't tell you about my morning this morning. And then it doesn't clean up after themselves or misbehavior in public. I can't really see a raise of hands, but I can feel your energy, and I know that many of you can identify. This is one of my favorite cartoons because this pretty much sums up both when I became a new teacher and also when I became a new parent. I became a parent about 6 years after I began teaching, and I will give you this disclaimer that it is much easier working with your children than it is with my own. And
Chip, I would totally agree with that because I had the same kind of experience with my own. So yeah.
and my kids have so access to buttons that I didn't even realize that I had. But that's not generally what we got into this world of parenting for. I mean, I can remember holding my son when he was, just an infant. And if you ask me what are the things that I wanted, it'd be the same thing that many of the participants in my workshops come up with is, ultimately, what is it that we want for our children if we could just give them a handful of qualities? And these are some of the things that people often come up with: independence, resilience. They want their children to be honest, compassionate, empathetic, kind, respectful, have good self-esteem, to be capable, creative, cooperative, helpful, open, have a love of learning, they're self-assured, curious, persistent, and have ingenuity. And that's what we're going to do in the next 20 minutes. I'm going to teach you exactly how to do that. And there's a little bit of tongue-in-cheek there. But one of the things that I want to say is that setting limits is probably one of the hardest things to do as parents. Many of us grew up in either maybe an authoritarian or a permissive environment, and a lot of times when we're under stress, we go back to what we know, and that's when we wind up saying the things that we promised ourselves that we would never say, or doing the things that we promised ourselves that we would never do. And of course, if you're anything like me, when I was holding my infant son, doing all the things that I judged other parents for when I was just holding an infant in my hand, and promised myself I would never be like that parent. And then I found myself in the grocery store a handful of times being just that parent that I had judged so harshly. So in Montessori and also in positive discipline, I just want to talk about a few components of what we actually consider to be effective discipline. The first is that the effective discipline is respectful to everybody that's involved, that it's kind, but it's also firm. Children need both kindness and firmness. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. It also helps children get a sense of belonging and significance. Alfred Adler believed that children the reason that children misbehaved is because they were seeking belonging and significance in their community, and they sometimes got discouraged in trying to attain that. So that might just be through they don't have the proper social skills, or they're still learning how to interact with other humans, and in their desire to be accepted and to belong, they try different methods in order to gain that, and sometimes those methods are actually counterproductive. So what he would say to a child who's throwing a tantrum on the floor of the grocery store would be, that is a child who just wants to belong, but is just having a hard time and is discouraged in attaining that goal for himself. The next thing is that it's effective long term. We all have those tools, and I, especially as a teacher, I've got lots of tools that work for the moment. One of my favorites is, and it's not a good tool, is what I call Look 72, which is just might be like the Vulcan death stare. And I'm looking at a child, and my whole body language says, if you don't stop doing that, something bad is going to happen. And it might stop it for the moment, but the question is that when I leave the room, is that child going to continue on with the misbehavior, or are they going to be more inspired to cooperate and to be respectful, to be a contributing member of their community? The other thing is that the effective discipline should teach valuable social. What's that?
Yeah, so we really are trying to teach things that will last over the long haul, rather than just the quick fix in the moment, right?
Right. Now, in the moment we're under stress, we'll do anything. but the idea behind learning some of these tools is that when we have things that we can do, actions that we can complete that maybe are not part of that repertoire that we learned growing up, it's much more easy, and we practice them, it's much more easy to access those things when we are in a moment of stress and when we're likely to misbehave ourselves. Effective discipline also teaches valuable social and life skills for good character. Again, are the children going to behave when I'm not there? And it invites children to discover how capable they are and encourages constructive use of personal autonomy and power. That's one of the things that allowed me to fall in love with Montessori is the idea of a constructive use of personal power and autonomy that children really have. And before we jump into the tools, I just want to take a moment and look at this chart. This is used not just in positive discipline, but it's a model that was developed during the 70s when a researcher took on the Herculean task of trying to research effective parenting skills. And essentially what she did is she began to observe parents, and she began to categorize their styles of parenting. And this is what she came up with. In the top left-hand corner was a permissive, where there's a lot of kindness, but not a lot of firmness. And then next to that was an authoritative, where there's both high kindness and high firmness at the same time. And then she's families where there's abuse and neglect, so there was low firmness and low kindness. And then an authoritarian environment where there's low kindness and high firmness. So you see at the top of the top two boxes represent, that top half represents high kindness, the bottom half represents low kindness, the left half of the graph represents low firmness, and the right hand is high firmness. And what she found through her research is that the families where she saw both high kindness and high firmness at the same time were those where many of these qualities that we talked about a couple minutes ago became evident in children. As a matter of fact, in that authoritative model, which is basically a democratic leadership model, when parents involved children in problem solving, when they were kind and firm in how they followed through, and they used some of those principles we just talked about for effective discipline, the researcher tracked these kids all through, way into adulthood. As a matter of fact, some of the research, I believe, is still going on. And she found that across all areas of their life, they were far more successful than children who came from other methods of parenting. Now, the trick is being high kindness and being high kind and high firm at the same time. If you're anything like me, that's easy to do on a day where everything's going my way, where the sun is shining. You know, I've got a little extra money in my pocket. My wife was kind to me and treated me in the way that I feel that I deserve, and everything's going my way. The kids got in the car this morning without a hassle. Everybody remembered all of their belongings. I've got 4 children, and they all go to my school. And we're off, and I'm into my first meeting on time. In that moment, it is not too hard for me to be kind and firm at the same time. But if it starts raining on a day where I've got to mow the lawn and the kids, you know, their lack of preparation caused me to be 20 minutes late for my first meeting. My wife wasn't too thrilled with me, and I've had maybe not enough sleep and too much coffee, which is a common element in my life. What happens for me is that I'm under stress, and I'm not so kind and firm at the same time. And where I start off personally is I start off in that lower right-hand quadrant, which is I become authoritarian, which is it's my way or the highway. I'm not so kind. I'm super firm, and it looks a little bit like Marine Corps boot camp. But the problem is with that is that the kids don't respond too well. If I stay in that place, by about halfway through the day, I hate myself so much that I slide over into the permissive quadrant, which is diagonally across the street, and all the rules go out the window, and I'm taking everybody out to ice cream. And now, of course, the problem with that is that by about 3 o'clock, I hate them so much that I'm back down in the authoritarian quadrant.
Yeah.
And that's what we call the permissive authoritarian dance. My wife is just the opposite. When she's under stress, she starts off in the permissive, and then, you know, by noon, she can't stand the kids so much, and she drops down into the authoritarian, and then comes back the other way. And one of the things that we now know with brain research is that when we have tools that we can use and that we've practiced, you know, much like pilots have when they go through emergency procedures, they practice these skills that they have in these methods for getting out of a jam with a mechanical failure over and over and over and over again. When they go into those a simulator, they're not playing video games. They're working on most of the time on emergency procedures. And the reason they do that is because when something happens that they, you know, a mechanical failure or something, that is not the time to become creative. But when we're under stress, we tend to, you know, not to behave well, not to make good decisions. We're not operating out of the thinking part of our brain, and we're operating out of the reptilian part of our brain. So what I'd like to do for the rest of the webinar is maybe talk to you a little bit about some tools that we can use that might allow us to be kind and firm at the same time when we're likely to be under stress and maybe misbehave ourselves, which in turn causes discouragement in children and for them to misbehave. This is the tools for follow-through are basically what I would call alternatives to nagging. And one of the ways I think that we oftentimes invite misbehavior in children is when we fall back on some of those tools that we may have learned ourselves growing up, which is by reminding children a lot, redirecting them long after they need redirection. So with older children, trying to redirect them, that's certainly appropriate for toddlers and young children. But when you start to redirect older children, it just comes across as as nagging. When we repeat directives, rules, and requests, we state the obvious, or we say something like, "We don't do that in our house," right? So I'm going to talk about. Let's count them up here. I think I've got nine tools that we'll talk about. I probably won't get to all of them, but I'd like to talk about a few of them anyway. And your handouts that you received will cover much more than we have time for today. But let's start off with the first one, which is called acting without talking. This is a place where when you're setting a limit with a child, it's usually when you are following through with something that you already know that the child knows what to do. So, for instance, it might be cleaning his room, and so we'll make the assumption when we talk about this way of setting limits that the children have already been taught to do what you're asking them to do, and now is time to follow through. So there's no question of whether or not they understand what to do, because if we set limits with kids when they don't know what to do, then that's not fair to them. Again, the first one would be acting without talking. So this would look like if a child is maybe you've asked them to clean up their room 10 minutes ago. You're leaving the house in 20 minutes, and you're going to follow through at this point. So this would be a place where you just might take the child by the hand. Maybe you see him playing downstairs, and he's supposed to be up in his room cleaning, and you simply take them by the hand kindly and firmly, and just walk them up to their room. And point at the room and say absolutely nothing. The key to all of these tools is really really about what you don't say versus what you do say. So if you did something like acting without talking, the key to the follow through is really to follow through with silence. Oftentimes children will then start to push back, like, I don't want to clean my room, or you said I didn't have to clean my room on Saturdays, and we're going to do it on Fridays, and so whatever the argument is, the adult just will respond in all of these tools by just remaining calm and absolutely quiet and not saying anything, and giving a kind look but a firm look at the child.
Yeah, and some of us have a really, really hard time with that, Chip. But it really is very, very effective. I found in my own parenting and in the classroom that, they know they're smart. They know what the limit is. They know what the expectation is. And if we can just be quiet and just follow through, it is very powerful.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that I always like to bring up is that is this question of how many people does it take to engage in a power struggle, or how many people does it take to engage in an argument? And I joke around with that, even with my spouse, is that if she's angry with me, which isn't very often because I'm an excellent husband, is that even if she's angry, if I just remain quiet and don't participate in the argument and allow her the dignity of having her own feelings and her own experience without engaging in it, oftentimes that can, we can get to a place where we can actually solve a problem much more quickly, and children are no different. The second tool is limited choices, and limited choices are really, it's just a choice between 2 or 3 different choices for a child, and are limited to things that are respectful to both the child and acceptable to both the child and the adult. So I'll just continue to use this example of a child cleaning up their mess. So you might approach a child and that same child and say they're downstairs playing and they should have, you've asked them to clean their room, and you say, you should have been cleaning your room. What's going on? And the child says, well, I want to play with the Legos. And so the adult might just respond with something like, would you like to complete it now, or would you like to complete it in 5 minutes? You choose. Now, of course, most children are going to say 5 minutes, but that's okay. We can just quickly set a timer or just look at our watch and come back. And then when it's time to follow through, again, we just follow through with absolute silence. We might tap them on the shoulder and say, okay, it's 5 minutes. And if the child begins to push back, we say nothing. We're there with kindness and firmness. And all of these tools use that what I call the power of silence, where we allow the child we just become almost a stone wall, but with love. And oftentimes when adults role play this, which we do in workshops, when I explain it, it doesn't make, there's some pushback from the adults, but when they actually experience it, they realize that they feel, as children, they feel so much more respected when the adult does not engage in the argument with them or does not engage in discussion or lecturing, but just follows through with silence.
Yeah.
The next thing is pretty self-explanatory, which is just stating a reasonable request in 10 words or less. Okay. Would you please clean up your room now? The next one is one of my favorites. I use this all the time, which I just use one word. I'm a lecturer. I like to talk. It comes naturally to me. So for me when I use the 10 words or less, I'm usually at 20 words. So for instance, if my son left his wet towel on the bathroom floor, I might just walk by on point and say, towel. When he said, it's not mine, I say nothing because I know it is. And I just stand there and wait for him to pick it up. The next one is great. This is terrific for kids. Oftentimes it would work well for adolescents, is using a signal or a note. So this is, maybe a child is being disrespectful at the dinner table or something like that, and you've had this conversation a number of times. You've got company over. So rather than embarrassing in front of the company, I go to my 14-year-old son and I go in the kitchen and I'd write a note. Then I'd bring it out to him. I'd hand it to him underneath the table, and it just says, please be respectful of your siblings during, while we have company, or forever. So. And then just using I statements. With younger children, it's simple. It's called bugs and wishes is a tool that we use, which is, I don't like it when you throw your food on the floor, and I wish you would please clean it up. Or with older children, just using I feel statements and asking for what we want, which is interesting that oftentimes adults, you wouldn't think this, but we oftentimes don't model well for children asking for specifically what we want. It's really easy for us to complain about what we don't like. But next time you're even if you're with your spouse or your partner, finish up the complaint with asking for what it is that you want instead. So with children, it might sound like, it's really frustrating to me that that you're waiting to the last minute to make your lunch before we go out the door. I wish tomorrow that you would please make your lunch before we have breakfast.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Now, Chip, I just want to remind you, we have about 5 minutes left. So just as a reminder.
Great. Well, I'll just go through these next through. Take a minute, and there's a short video I'd like you to see. Actually, we caught a real-life example at my house on video, and I'll show that to you. So the next one is giving information. I notice your towel's on the floor. We're describing what you see. I notice that you're running through the house. Or this is something that adults aren't great at, but is a terrific skill to model for children, which is just saying no without an explanation. If you ever try that, see how difficult it is. A lot of times we offer explanations to children about why we're saying no. And what that does is really open up the situation to discussion or manipulation, when really the adult is just trying to set a boundary. So next time your child asks for ice cream and it's before dinner, just try saying no and say nothing afterwards. But do it with a smile on your face. Okay. Oh, good. So this is a real-life example. This is my daughter who dropped some Cheerios on the floor at the house. And the first time that I go to talk to her, I chose a tool that wasn't working, and then I shifted to limited choices, and it worked out pretty well. So I'll give you a chance to see this. Oh, I don't know what happened there.
Click to exit. End of slideshow. Okay, let's try again.
See if I can. All right, let's give it a shot.
Okay, we are back again. There you go.
So that's a real life example.
Nice. Thanks for sharing that one.
Sure.
Chip, it's been great. Thank you. There's been some really good information that you've shared with us today. I know that participants probably really appreciated it. And again, we're happy to have you come back another time and share more, because I'm sure you have lots more that you can share.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
You're very, very welcome. I want to remind folks that next session we have Cheryl Allen, who is an elementary teacher here at Newgate School, and she's going to talk about how do we keep children learning during breaks. Like right now we happen to be coming up to summer break. And I know that folks in our culture get very nervous and, want to know, what do I do during the summer to keep my child going? Well, Cheryl's got some really great ideas that are fun and that will keep everybody with their minds active over the summer. And the session after that is Carrie Conti, who's been with us once before, and she's going to be talking about the understanding the growing brain. And Chip even mentioned the reptilian brain at one point in the talk today, and she'll be talking about the different parts of the brain and how that affects whether or not we're good at communicating and at providing opportunities for discipline and learning. So she will be on then. So thank you for joining us today, everyone, and we will be back next week.